Okay, welcome everyone and good morning. Thank you very much for coming on a Friday morning to CPR. We're very, very lucky to have this talk by Rashmi Sharma on government at the grassroots, a case of field administration. This is part of an ongoing series of talks that we at the State Capacity Initiative at CPR are hosting and will continue to host that look at the complex, nitty-gritty, often ignored, often inglorious work of actually making state and public programs work, and the everyday life and organizational life of our bureaucracies. Let me briefly introduce Rashmi, and then we can start the talk. So Rashmi Sharma is a former IAS officer from Madhya Pradesh cadre, and I first met her when I was doing fieldwork in MP 10 years ago now on agricultural markets, and she's currently a visiting senior fellow at ICRIER. Rashmi's work has involved working at the state and central levels in numerous capacities, but I think a long-standing passion and area of real contribution has been on local government and in the field of education, where she has written two very important books. Most recently, she's been spending time working in the field, which is rare, I think, for senior IAS officers. I think by the time you move to that level, many don't spend that much time in the field. And so she's been really thinking at the district level about district administration and the institutional structure, as well as the challenges that frontline workers face at the district and at the grassroots. At the State Capacity Initiative, we're also very lucky to have Rashmi's ongoing advice and counsel as we develop our programs and think about the kinds of research and practice work that we would like to do. So, Rashmi, over to you. Thank you.
So it's a pleasure to be here, and just to begin this little presentation or talk, so a familiar phrase, at least I've heard it non-stop, is that the policy was good and the implementation was bad. I don't know how many of you hear it all the time. So we are looking a little bit at the implementation was bad, and why is this phrase so ubiquitous in India, and why do we hear it with almost every policy? So basically what this phrase means is that there are major, does this kind of expand or do we keep it at this size? I think it's this size. Okay. No, that's so I just wondered whether I was proceeding. That's fine. So I think what this phrase points to is that there is a lot of there are a lot of very wide and deep systemic problems with our governance system. So, I mean, we have in the past decade and a half seen a lot of initiatives where when people have been dissatisfied with government, they have tried to increase public accountability through the RTI Act, through the RTE Act, various public service guarantee acts, to say that, okay, we demand certain things. But I think it's also necessary to look at the capacity to deliver. You can demand, but if the capacity to deliver or the will to deliver or whatever you call it is not there, then there is a kind of there's a kind of jam out there. So we are looking a little bit at this side, which is not usually looked at. And because I find that there is very little actually field work about what exactly goes on in governance, CPR being an exception, and this new project hopefully getting us much greater detail. But at present we have very limited work, maybe in the accountability initiative and so on, but generally very little published work is available. So therefore what I undertook was a case study. And in this case study, rather than kind of take up one or two factors and look across districts, I looked at one district and tried to look at a host of issues. So that is the whole idea. And from there, I tried to look at what is the structure of our field administration, how does it function, and sort of what happens. So broadly what we did was that there were also a lot of fieldwork agencies involved in this. There were 3 agencies which actually did the fieldwork. So we mapped the administrative structure and panchayat structure on the ground. Then we selected 8 sample departments and we studied them in greater detail. What kind of human resources do they have? What is the sort of infrastructure they have? What is their financial picture? How do they work? That is very important. And what kind of interface they have with the community. So for 8 departments, we looked at that. And then we also, this project was taken up with the help of Pradhan, and they had a project in a backward area of, a less developed area of Madhya Pradesh, a tribal area. And since their interests are in that particular area, so from the point of view of the community, the focus of this project was on less developed rural areas. So we also selected 5 villages in a tribal block in Madhya Pradesh, and we tried to understand how government was playing out in those 5 villages. So at the outset, one sort of limit of this study is it looks at less developed rural areas. The picture may shift a little bit with more developed rural areas and may shift further with urban areas. So these are the 8 departments. There is revenue and forest. Revenue is, as you know, a regulatory department, mainly concerned with land management. Forest with forest management. Then panchayat and rural development. It's a slightly fuzzy department, but it looks at livelihoods, it looks at rural infrastructure, and so on. Then school education, public health and family welfare, women and child development, public health engineering, and we just took cooperation because it's so different from other departments for cooperative societies. Now, unfortunately, in this presentation, I cannot talk too much about individual departments because there is not much time, but the report is under print, so I can send you a copy if anyone is interested, they can have a look at it. So we studied some 41 organizations, which included 10 at the district level, 11 at the block level, subdivision or block level, and another 20 at the village or sub-block level. We interviewed some 95 people, which included officials, panchayat representatives, representatives from NGOs, journalists, and we also conducted some 13 focus group discussions in those 5 villages. Now, if you look at this district, we don't have, I don't want to spend much time on the socio-economic profile because that's not the subject, but just broadly that it's from all India parameters, it's an average sort of district, except that it has a slightly higher tribal population. It has 921 villages, 12 towns, and each village has an average population of 886. Okay? This is important because here you're talking about small settlements. So that is an issue. Generally, it's an agriculture-based economy in the district. It has high irrigation, higher than the all India average, but the land holdings are small. And something like 50% of the workforce are laborers, derive most of their income from casual labor, daily wage labor. There is in the tribal area some income from the forest, like people go and get firewood and they get various kinds of small forest produce like honey, tendu leaves, and so on. And in the sample 5 villages that we took, in 3, the pattern was that there were 1 or 2 or maybe more dominant landholders, and the rest, they leased out their land informally, and rest of the people work on that. And 2 villages, which were predominantly tribal, there was almost no well-off person. So there was a kind of general poverty. The access roads were good. All the villages, this was a surprise to me because in the good old days when I used to work in the same state, to have access roads to every village was, it was considered a highly developed district. But anyway, you would be shocked to know, I hope you will be shocked to know, that there is no public bus service. And the one-way fare is something like 7 to 29% of the MGNREGS wages. Okay, so and people have to, every village doesn't also have a bus stand. So the hand pumps are the main source of drinking water. Tap water is available in 20% villages, and uniformly there's a water crisis in summer, which is identified as a key issue. There is load shedding. There is electricity. That also, from my days, is a big change. But there is a lot of load shedding. So it's not available for all the time. Just very broad look at the institutional structure. Anganwadis and primary schools are available everywhere. But middle schools, the availability becomes much less as you go to higher levels of education. Healthcare is sparse. Okay, so for every there are two kinds of health centers. One very broad classification, one which has doctors, one which doesn't have doctors. So if you think of health centers with doctors, on an average there's one per 36 villages, which is quite a bit, quite sparse. And if you think of health centers with only a health worker who's, normally 12th class pass and trained subsequently, there is one per 5 villages. So this is a very, very broad picture of the background. Now, if you look at district administration, it has a very wide role. Okay, it looks at law and order, infrastructure development, socio-economic development, social services, and some amount of revenue collection. So this is, in a way, you could say, a strength of our district administration, that we reach out in very many ways to a very large number of people. Now, if you look at the structure of district administration, so there are 3 strands of governance. Okay, one is what I call departmental governance. So there are offices of some 37 departments in the district, and these offices are very strongly vertically linked to their state offices at the department level. So this is one axis. This is the strongest axis of governance. The second axis is the district collector, who has a law enforcement role and a coordination role, but also plays a role in socio-economic development. We'll come to that. Then there are elected panchayats in the rural areas and municipalities in the urban areas. Their formal role is for socio-economic development, civic services, and also a certain amount of coordination in these areas. So when you look at district governance, just see all these 3 are happening simultaneously, and the governance is defined by the characteristics of these 3 and how they interact, the total picture that kind of emerges. If you look at the area types, how we classify area for governance, we classify into rural and urban, of course, you are all aware of, though now many areas are, something in between. Many, areas around urban areas are acquiring a different character, and also rural area is a very differentiated kind of landscape. So that is also something that I think we have not really come to grips with. Within rural, we classify areas into, most of the area is called revenue area, and some area is called forest area, which again is classified into reserved and protected, being more or less accessible to people. Then we also classify areas parallelly into tribal and non-tribal areas, with tribal areas having a Schedule 5 thing. And then in these districts, there was some defense ministry area. So you'll have pockets like that, something with an industrial house, something with a... So this is how we kind of, for governance, classify areas. And, as we will see, there are different roles also, sometimes according to the area. Now, if you look, as I said, there are 30 offices of 37 departments in the district. Now, if you classify these departments, most of these are what I called subject focused. So like I'm looking at school education, or some department is handling health, or some department is, say, handling agriculture. So they have a defined subject. But there are also client-focused departments, like women and child development. You are looking at a particular client groups. So especially in case of deprived groups, scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, there are client-focused departments too. Then there are some expertise-focused departments, smaller in number, say finance. So you don't look at a subject area, but you have a particular expertise, or say public relations. So there are a small number of these departments, and some are sort of hybrid. You can't really say what they are. So if you look at, this is one classification, this is in type. The other classification is maybe in terms of regulatory, which are more concerned with the enforcing the rule of law, like revenue, police, etc., revenue collection, and socio-developmental. Again, if you'll see, the dominant number of departments are socio-developmental. So in a sense, that is also a strength of our administration. I'm talking about strength because the last time I discussed this, that people asked me in the end that you've described all these problems and all. How is it that some things happen? So I become a bit more cautious. So I am. So this is also a strength of our district administration, that we have a wide kind of framework for socio-economic development. Now, how is the role of these offices departmental? We are talking here of departmental offices, not about the DC, not about panchayats. How is the role of these departments defined? So you will not find, if you go to an office, that here is the role or charter of my office, and here you will not find a document like that. Rather, if you look sort of this thing, there are either laws, the regulatory departments, there will be a revenue code, police will be working through its particular laws, which form the kind of background of what a particular set of departmental offices do, or schemes. Okay? So most developmental departments will have some major schemes that they implement, and willy-nilly, that is how their role is defined. And there is, of course, also the management of public assets. So if a department has a large number of schools, that is an important part of its role. If it looks after roads, that is an important part of its role. I'm talking about in practice, that this is how their role gets defined. So now this is pretty narrowly defined. That is one of the findings of the study. So when you talk to officials and all, what is your role? They will often talk, when we interview, they will say, I implement such a scheme, or, I do this. And this is especially so in case of departments concerned with socio-economic development. You see, departments which rest on law still have a slightly greater autonomy, because a law is a general principle, law or rules, and you apply it to specific cases. When you come to schemes, things are really defined in great detail. This is the activity you will take up. This is the cost at which you will take up this activity. So it's a pretty rigid and narrow kind of definition. Also, you see, you look at these subject-focused, client-focused, expertise-focused departments, etc., there tends to be an overlap. Because if you are talking about education, and you're talking about, say, a women and child development department, or a scheduled tribe welfare department, then obviously they also would be looking at the subject of education, and you have a subject-oriented department too. Now, how do they deal with it? What happens is that you would expect, at least that is what I would expect, that the scheduled tribe department, when looking at education, would specifically look at the education of scheduled tribes, see what are the key issues that are specific to scheduled tribes, and advise the education department on that. But this is not how it works. what happens is that suppose there is a Schedule 5 block. You say, okay, the administration of schools in this block is with the Scheduled Tribe Department. And the administration of schools in the other blocks is with the School Education Department. So this kind of role splitting, which frankly doesn't make all that much sense. So that is another sort of thing. And similarly with other departments. Now, if you look at the units of administration, we come into massive problems in units itself. So now district is a very strong administrative unit, and all but 4 departments have district-specific offices in among these 32, that this is our office for the district. But when you go below the district, now this is our sample departments. Some of them work as per subdivisions, okay? And even these subdivisions are not the same because the numbers are different, if you see. Forest and revenue, of course, work in different areas, so their subdivisions are different. But even PHE and revenue have different numbers of subdivisions. So it's not really the same. Then the socio-economic development related departments usually work as per blocks, okay? But the revenue department works as per tehsils, okay? And these are cross-cutting in this thing. The smarter states have at least merged the block and tehsil and made them the same, but not my state. So this is, when you go to the sub-block level, every department is doing its own thing, okay? Someone says, I will work as per a halka. Someone says, I will work as per a supervisor circle. So every department has a separate kind of unit. Then also, if you look at whether departments work in urban areas or forest areas, again they vary, okay? Some will work in all areas, some will work only in rural areas, some will. So what I'm saying is that below the district, it's a very disparate picture. And what this really means for structurally is that it's very difficult to coordinate below the district because you actually don't have a proper governance unit below the district. So this is a major structural issue. Then there are a lot of organizations, a large number of organizations. If you can divide them into management organizations, which is each department has a large number of organizations. So which are basically, implementing schemes, managing institutions, so on and so forth. And then there are a lot of non-management organizations. So you have a lot of law enforcement, some law enforcement organization. Again, you have social service organizations, which are schools, hospital, commercial, technical, and training. So these are the 4 types of organizations you have in the district. And again, the social service organizations are the highest in number. Now, there are, as I said, 37 departments in the district, which is, huge, Now, what happens because of the number of 37 departments is that each has its tiny little offices, so that out of these 37 departments, 16 had only a district level presence, okay? And we are talking about 12 lakh people here. So how they work, I don't know. Unfortunately, when we planned this study, we took all what we thought were important departments, and we didn't take any of these departments which have only a district level. So maybe someone would someday I would like to see what the hell, how do they go about their work. And then 7 of them have a subdivision or block level presence, and only 12 have a below block presence, okay? So block is some 2 lakh people. So, and below block, maybe 25,000 people or so, only around 12 departments would have a presence around them. So only 12 departments are really accessible to the people. And in our study, we are skewed, as I said. 7 of our sample departments had a below block presence. So we don't understand. I will not be able to throw too much light. So how do these departments really work? 37 departments coming together, coordinating. So there are a lot of committees. They also set up a lot of committees. So at the district level, there were some 82 committees, which I'll come back to this later. And they also set up various kinds of committees to, these district level committees are basically for coordination, and village level committee to elicit people's participation. Now, if you look at the DC and the panchayat, so you actually have, not only do you have 37 departments which are hard to coordinate, you have 2 coordinating actors in the district. Now, the DC is the head of the district collector, is the head of the revenue department and also considered the overall administrative head. There are numerous laws, I think there are more than 100, in which the DC has some kind of authority or the other. So he or she is a law enforcer, so to say. Also, the DC derives the authority partly from laws and partly from the fact that he or she writes the annual appraisal report of all the officers. So they want to be, which later becomes a basis for promotion, so they want to be in her good books. Then the DC's power also derives from the fact that departments give financial control to DC. They will say, okay, the DC will now exercise financial control over this. These files will be approved by the DC. Now, so the interesting picture that emerged in these 8 departments, I'm sorry, it's not possible to present all the data and all the findings here. I can only give a gist. But that the control of the DC across department varies a lot. For instance, it was very high in school education and WCD, though these are not law enforcement issues. But these departments had decided that we want to involve the DC in a big way. On the other hand, PHE, which is concerned with drinking water, gives almost no powers to the DC. Generally, engineering departments don't like the DC involved. There's a reason behind it, but anyway, we won't go into that. So the DC also, as a coordinator, has a very uneven kind of sort of say, and it's in law and order, the role is not disputed, but in socio-economic development, though the DC has a say, it's very uneven. And below the DC, through the revenue department, the coordination capacity is very weak indeed. Because below the DC, you have the SDM. First of all, you don't have a unit, firm unit below the district level. Then, through the revenue department, you have the SDM, who does not write the annual appraisal report of any officials. Okay? So people may or may not listen to the SDM. So you have a very weak kind of coordination structure, though the SDM is asked to coordinate often. But like when we interviewed the SDM and all, so he complained that people don't listen to me and so on and so forth. And I want that either I should have some authority over them or let them do their own work. I don't want to meddle. So he is also in a slightly difficult position. Now we look at panchayats. You have panchayats at 3 levels. You have the district panchayat, you have the Janpad panchayat at the block level, and you have gram panchayats for 1 to 4 villages. Now, the very good thing about our panchayats is that because of the reservation, they are perhaps the most egalitarian governance institution in India, with representation of women, scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, and so on. And also, when we looked at the background of gram panchayat representatives, at least 40% of them were very poor. So here you have a genuinely representative institution in the gram panchayat, and they also have a connect to the people. Now, if you look, in matters of law and regulation, the DC's authority is undisputed. But when you come to socio-economic development, though the powers in law, there are wide powers given to panchayats, but in practice, most of the powers are with the departments, and as they choose to delegate with the DC. And basically, the panchayats are disempowered. They have hardly any untied funds. And all the panchayats in this, they basically ran a few government schemes. The panchayat, you see, when we went to the Zilla Parishad, the researcher who was supposed to, figure out the structure of the Zilla Parishad, I mean, was tearing his hair. And I was also a bit, like, why can't you do it? Why can't you just, So when I went there, I found that it doesn't have a structure really. There is something called the core Zilla Panchayat, which has some staff, like, there's a project officer, and then there are assistant project officers and a few clerks and things. So this is one thing. Then there are program managers of various schemes which are placed in the Zilla Panchayat. So our researcher could not really figure out whether they were part of the panchayat or they were not. And really, you can look at the Zilla Panchayat as a set of concentric circles. So there is an inner core, and then there are these departmental program officers, which are the second core. So they take most of their instructions from their departments, but they're also sitting in the Zilla Parishad and doing some day-to-day kind of reporting to the CEO. And then there are a range of departments which take various kinds of approvals from the Zilla Panchayat. So when I asked some of the Zilla Panchayat officials which are these departments, they were not very clear. So sometimes some file turns up and sometimes some file turns up. So it really is, because it is one thing on paper and another thing in reality, it's a very vague and diffused kind of structure. Also, the role of panchayats keeps shifting. Okay? So in Madhya Pradesh, in the mid-1990s, they were empowered. Then the government changed, and a lot of the powers were, even if they were not taken away in law, they were taken away in practice. So what one finds there's a lot of the situation I described when the Zilla Panchayat people are not clear about what their role is and which department reports to them and which doesn't, there's a lot of confusion about what we are supposed to do, and there is also a lot of dissatisfaction. So when we went through the minutes of the Zilla Panchayat, we looked at the meeting minutes of the Zilla Panchayat and the Janpad Panchayat and Gram Panchayat. At the Zilla Panchayat and Janpad Panchayat, I was surprised to find there were a lot of resolutions against officials. Okay, so is terrible, and such doesn't, attend my meeting. So there is a lot of friction with officials because there is partly because there is lack of clarity. So the result of all this is that you really don't have a consolidated plan or budget at the district level. So that is your unit of governance, which it doesn't have its own plan, which doesn't have a full-fledged budget. Now, if you look at human resources in government, okay? Now, there are nearly 12,000 people, and you can look at them in 4 ways. One is some people, that is in terms of working conditions. Some are regular, a majority, but a significant number are contractual. Then the regular personnel are divided in 4 classes, 1, 2, 3, 4, depending on their status. Here, most of the personnel are in class 3. Then regular employees are also divided into a range of services. Okay? I mean, I can't tell you how many services there are in Madhya Pradesh. And I don't think even I'm not sure if their personnel department can. Okay? Maybe I should have rung up and checked, but anyway. So, but functionally, if you look, the kind of people who are working in the district, you have supervisors, who should also be planners, but anyway, experts, you have grassroots workers, you have office workers, and you have helpers. So this is the very sort of, you can look at the personnel in these ways. And one characteristic of our field administration is that most grassroots workers are class 3. Now this is a question, I think I'll come to it later, that we need to ask whether this is appropriate that grassroots worker have a low status. Okay? Then, as I said, among the regular employees, they are divided into different what is called services. Among contractual employees, there are no formal divisions, but some are managers and experts at the supervisory level, and others are grassroots workers. Now, as I said, the regular employees are divided into various services. So what is a service? A service is persons with similar qualification, common selection process, and also similar training much of the time. You can have general qualifications. Some services have general qualifications, when like you have a BA and you do an exam and you get into the service, or some like engineers or doctors have to have specialist qualifications. So there are many state engineering services, there are state medical services where there are specific qualifications. Basically, the specialist services we found were of three kinds, in the district at least: engineers, doctors and paramedics, and teachers. Okay? Generally, when people take people with general qualifications, there is a kind of induction training for junior levels up, can be as little as 2 months, but for many levels it can be as much as 2 years. In the 8 sample departments, 4 hired people with general qualifications, 3 with specialized qualifications, and 2 both types. Basically, rural development also took some engineers and 1 other department. Now, there are also several types of grassroots workers like patwaris, ANMs, Anganwadi workers. So in these 8 sample departments, I haven't made a chart, but it's there in the report of what they are, how they are recruited, and so on and so forth. There were 26 such types of workers. Most of them had general skills, but the 2 specialist types were engineering diploma holders and teachers with teacher training degrees or diplomas. Around half these types worked in institutions like schools, Anganwadis, and so on. And another half was just allotted an area. Like a patwari simply said, okay, told, you look after these 5 or 6 villages. He or she doesn't have an institution that they work in. Now, what you find when you look at the organizations, that there is very limited managerial and expert staff in these organizations in the light of work that is expanding. So one of the questions that we asked when we interviewed all these people was, what are those who had worked for 20 years or more, what are the changes that you have seen in your I have not listed it here, but one change that they all identified uniformly was that the scope of work has increased because the government has taken up more and more programs, but the human resources have remained fairly static. So when you look at the sample subdivision and block organizations, except for the tehsil, they were 1 officer and some clerks and things like that. For instance, the sub-district magistrate, who's supposed to coordinate, do revenue casework, maintain law and order, among other things, is only 1 person, 1 officer in the subdivision. Then even among the 10 district organizations, 5 had only 1 officer. And you're talking about 12 lakh people in the district. And if you look at the grassroots organization, of course, in the study, we've looked at a range of grassroots organizations. I can't go in all of them here. But just look at the role of the Anganwadi and the staff of the Anganwadi. So you open the Anganwadi, 9 to 4. You feed the children twice there. You do preschool education. You weigh the children and see if anyone is malnourished. Those who are severely malnourished, you get them admitted to the Nutrition Resource Center. Then you talk to 0 to 3 years children, again, and pregnant and lactating mothers. You provide supplementary nutrition weekly. You weigh them to see if any of them are malnourished. You ensure vaccination of all these groups. You take up departmental programs regarding adolescent girls and domestic violence, and you maintain the most extensive records, 15 registers you maintain. And for that, you have sort of stupendous staff of one Anganwadi worker and one Sahika, who basically might help in the distributing the meal and so on and so forth. So it's basically, I think, an undoable task. Asha is a health worker. No, not necessarily. Only for vaccination and maybe some health programs.
The Anganwadi workers not even given a salary, just an honorary.
Yeah, that also. You're very right. So now, if you look at the panchayats, the panchayat representatives are a mixed bag. We found some very, very motivated panchayat representatives, okay? Not only did many panchayat representatives say that we have fought elections to win fought elections to improve my area, etc., but their actions, some of them had, for instance, there was in one gram panchayat, there was a tribal sarpanch. In that gram panchayat, in the previous term, there had been a very, very corrupt sarpanch, and there had been embezzlement, and the person was in jail. And this guy, he was a poor person, he said that, no, I want a better panchayat. So he collected a lot of people, and he decided to fight the election. He approached a political party. The political party did not give him support, but he fought the election anyway, and he won. Okay? And now he was really sort of, he just went at the panchayat, and there was a turnaround in the panchayat. Similarly, we came across several such people in panchayats, okay, who were going beyond their mandate and who were really interested. So you have this set of leaders, genuine leaders in the panchayats. You have among women panchayat leaders, or as you all know, we have two kinds of women panchayat leaders. One is definitely there is a fair number of people, women leaders, who are there because of this is a seat reserved for women, and my family wants me to stand. My husband will control the panchayat. There were those, but there were also women who had come out of SHG federations, women who had been part of political movements, and they showed a totally different kind of leadership here. So when you looked at the administrative staff, as I said, in the Zilla Panchayat, I said there were these, it was structured in these concentric circles. So we found that there were 5 schemes running in the Zilla Panchayat. Each scheme had a separate program manager and a separate accountant. Okay? So what was done was that the same kind of skill set was repeated. So you have 4 or 5 program managers and you have 4 or 5 accountants. Now, if you had an integrated structure, you could have had one person for, say, community, issues, another person who specialized in, communication, or another person who specialized in, say, housing, eco-friendly material construction. So instead of having these kinds of skills, you had repeated the same skills over and over again. And of course, in the Gram Panchayat, though it's supposed to be responsible for socio-economic development of the area, etc., you basically had one secretary and one MG Narega Rozgar Sahayak and no accountant. Okay? So you have a fair amount of money going through without any accountant. So this was the panchayats. Now, across the administrative structure, there were 3 very major gaps in expertise. One was there was no person, you have almost 12,000 employees in this district, but there is no human resource management person. Okay? And if you, for instance, the largest number of employees are in the school education department. And there are a number of court cases, litigation. If you talk to any school education department official, chances are that he'll say, I'm about to go to the court. Okay, so people's personnel issues don't get sorted out because there's no one to sort them out to begin with, and they all approach courts. So further tangling of the office in various kinds of non-productive work. And this was across. Then law. I mean, here I was, in fact, I had not realized this fully, that here is this, the district administration deals with legal issues non-stop. Almost everything that you do has some kind of legal implications. But there's not a single legal expert to advise them. Okay? And some officials also said that I want more legal advice. Then community relations. So now one or two offices may have some departments had, like PHE had hired some people for community mobilization now. But look at the scale of work as far as community relations is concerned. But do you have a proper setup that helps you, communicate, that helps you kind of relate to, you don't, okay? So these are three very, I think, big gaps there. Then what happens because you have all these numerous departments? So you have, each department has one or two services. So you are running a very complex program, but with one or two skill sets. Like you say, take the PHE or drinking water department. It is mainly composed of engineers. But drinking water goes far beyond engineering. You have to relate to the community. You have to manage a large number of assets. There are financial implications. But so departments are running complex programs with one or two skill sets when they require a complicated set of skill sets. And then departments like PHE or school education have no management experts. Okay, though they school education manage a vast number of institutions and people, but they don't have any management. And then there are very plain specific expertise gaps, like in the women and child development. Well, malnutrition is a major focus. There's no nutritionist. There are almost 1,700 Anganwadis in this, more than 1,700 Anganwadis in the district who do preschool education. There's not one preschool education person in the whole department. So there are these massive, though whatever officials are there, their formal qualifications are good. I will not give you the detailed data, but you will have to take my word for it. Then there's a very high level of vacancies. Something like 40% of management and experts, in spite of all these gaps, there are these vacancies. In fact, when people say, why do things get done badly, with this, I say, why do things, I'm amazed that things...
Anything gets done, like how is anything getting done?
Yeah, we are in very dangerous territory. Yeah.
Most of it is proxy work done by social organizations.
Yeah, much, yeah. No, it's okay. So then let's look at the service conditions of these employees. So the unique thing about us is that, when all this new public management, etc. came and said, have contractual employees, at least they said that contractual employees should be paid more than regular employees because they don't have pension benefits and so on, and should have promotional avenues. But the contractual employees that we have kept at the grassroots are paid less than regular employees, and they have no promotion avenues. And since we started hiring these contractual employees in the mid-1990s, now we have some regular employees and some contractual employees, and there are huge anomalies in the salary structure. So if a driver is a regular employee, he is likely to be paid, he was in this particular, paid several times more than the head of the National Resource Center, a National Nutrition Resource Center, okay, because she was contractual. So these kinds of things. Now, because of this, and there are no promotion avenues, all contractual grassroots employees have unions, and they constantly agitate. So several times when we went for field work, the Anganwadi workers have gone to Delhi to sit on a dharna. This has happened, that has happened. Anyway. So, and sometimes they win. So like teachers in Madhya Pradesh and Gram Panchayat secretaries have managed to get much better working conditions. So what is the incentive structure here for such employees? Agitate and get better working conditions, not work hard and get whatever. So this is the incentive structure that we have created. Now you look at regular employees, the salaries are reasonable, but at the district level promotions are very, very slow. Some people are not promoted throughout their career. And the postings are patronage based, so you can align to powerful people and get the posting of your choice. You can set up rent seeking rackets with them and really do very well. Now again, here what is the incentive structure? Is it hard work? No. You align hard work, you are not getting promoted anyway, and you align to someone and at least nice posting and make a lot of money. And also in the district, when we looked at the tenure of various district heads, the average was less than a year. So you have no continuity of leadership. Then you have things like, for the grassroots employees, their travel bills are not paid. So they are forced to pay from their pocket. So in fact, one supervisory person said that the grassroots, if you look at the pay structure of the grassroots employee, he has to be corrupt. There's no other way that he can survive. Now just let's very briefly look at the infrastructure. So you still have a lot of problems of infrastructure, poor buildings, lack of space. So infrastructure gets worse as you go down. It's best at the district level and worst as you go lower down. We can just have a look at this slide. I will not go into in detail except one thing, that there are grassroots employees who don't have any workspace, okay? So there were patwaris in this district who 4 or 5 of them got together and rented their own office, okay? So this is the kind of infrastructure we have, and travel is a big problem. So because at the lower levels there are no travel arrangements, there are a lot of issues there. Now finance, again we had a lot of difficulty with this, okay? Because when I finally understood, this was because the district is ceasing to be a financial unit at all, okay? Let me go here. So there is increasing, okay, let me do it a bit more systematically. So basically the main source of funds is government grants tied to schemes. There are also taxes and royalties levied at the district level, in the district, but these are very small, and also these are just given to the government. They don't constitute part of the district. And again, in many departments, expenditure was low because they simply didn't have the manpower. So like if you don't have teachers, you don't have to pay teacher salaries, and so on and so forth. The panchayats, as I said, ZP and JP had, the Zilla and Janpad Panchayat had no sources of revenue. They used to get a Central Finance Commission grant earlier, which had been stopped, and basically they were expending some schemes. In fact, we were surprised to find you couldn't get a consolidated account. They didn't maintain consolidated accounts. No one could tell us what the expenditure. So finally, in the Zilla Parishad, we had to go to each kind of branch and gather the sort of for the Zilla Panchayat and JP. All grants are given to the Gram Panchayat. So, then Gram Panchayats can levy some taxes, but they don't really, this is not a very priority area. In Madhya Pradesh, even the FC grant, which is supposed to be given in an untied form, has been converted into a scheme. And the expenditure level is low, and accounts are of poor quality. Let us remember the manpower in the Gram Panchayat and the fact that there is no accountant. Now again, grassroots institutions, there are a lot of funding issues, especially in the Anganwadis, where a lot of Anganwadi workers said that we have to pay from our pocket for getting, a whitewash or whatever. So these, and to the sub-health centers, they had no grant. So they really had to do photocopying, etc., from their own pocket. Then when we looked at the cooperative societies, again, I can't go into details, but basically, cooperative societies are giving, facilitating loans to farmers and also selling them things like seeds and fertilizer. They are supposed to be business organizations, but all the rates, interest rates, everything is decided by the state government. So whether or not they can run as business organizations is a question, and some 50% of the cooperative societies in the district were in financial distress. Now, the reason why we had so much trouble getting any picture of finances, and it's still very incomplete, it remained incomplete, is that financial centralization is increasing exponentially. Okay? In 2 sample departments, that is PHE and WCD. The powers of the all financial powers had been centralized at the district level. So if the subdivision wanted to spend even 10 rupees, they had to approach the district level. So again, people were paying out of their pockets, somehow taking this. The second, many disbursements are now from the state level. Like the school education department couldn't tell us how much they spent on teachers' salaries because those funds were directly disbursed from the state level. Of course, there's no consolidated budget of the district, and many, as I said, district department officers don't even know what their budget is anymore. The funny thing in our system is that there are some untied funds available with MLAs, MPs, and also panchayat representatives to take a few projects. But no institution has untied funds to plan a project, except the forest department, I'm sorry, I've not been saying, which works as per a plan. I won't go into details, okay? So we can stop here if you like.